I'm going to try something a little different on this video. Instead of doing a lot of writing, I have typed it ahead of time. So if you see anything typed, you need to put it in your notes as well. In this video, we're talking about LCD, which is the least common denominator. This should be on your title for the 2 pages that we're going to be using for the notes. When do we use LCD? These are going to be notes you're going to write down on the teacher side. We use LCD when we compare fractions, and in class today we looked at some quick ways to compare fractions, but that's not always going to work out. So when we've used all those other strategies on that checklist we made today and they don't work, then we're going to have to go to LCD. So LCD is kind of your last straw when you can't make the other strategies work. Step 1, you want to write this down. We're going to look at both denominators. So I'm going to give an example of 2 fractions that we can compare. And remember, we talked about today that comparing was looking at if they were greater than, less than, or equal. So that's what we're going to be looking at with 2 fractions. So if we have the fraction 1/8 and we are comparing it to 7/10, and we've gone through our checklist, the numerators aren't the same, the denominators aren't the same, I can't reduce any of them, trying to do a visual wouldn't be precise, those kinds of things, then I'm going to go through these steps. And step 1 was to look at the denominator. In this one, the denominator is 8, and in this one, the denominator is 10. So that is our first step, is just to look at both of the denominators. Step 2, we're going to write the multiples of each of the denominator. Multiples are just like skip counting. So if I had 5 as the denominator, I would skip count 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. So I'm going to do the multiples of 8. So I've got 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, and I could go on. Roughly 5 or 6 multiples, and hopefully you'll see what's going on. Then I'm going to do it for 10. I've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then I'd have some more after that. So that's step 2. We wrote down the multiples of each denominator. Step 3, we're now going to find the least common multiple. The least common multiple is when you're looking at both the numbers, you're going to find the one that they have in common. Now I'm looking for the smallest of the 2 where they have it in common. So I look, there's not an 8, there's not a 16, not a 24, not a 32. Oh, look at this. They both have a 40, and that is the smallest one they have in common. So my LCM is 40. My least common multiple is 40. Now something magic happens. Once you find your LCM, it magically turns into your LCD. So we said our LCM was 40 on this particular one, so that means our LCD is 40. You don't have to do anything, it just is, because we were doing multiples, we were skip counting, and now we're going to change the fractions to where they have the same denominator. So we had 1/8 and we had 7/10, and we're still comparing the 2. So we just said the LCD was 40, so I've got to turn this guy into something 40th. And that's the same thing I'm going to do over here, is turn this into something 40th. Now let's think about this. This is just like when we were doing equivalent fractions. We're making some equivalent fractions here, and we're making some equivalent fractions here, and then we'll compare the 2 sets. So I know that 8 times 5 is 40, so whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So I would get 5 40ths. So these 1/8 is equivalent to 5 40th. Over here I know 10 times 4 is 40, so 7 times 4 is 28. So this one is 28 40ths. Now let's look at this. It's going to be a whole lot easier now to compare this fraction with this fraction because they both have the same denominator now. Now all I have to do is look up at the numerator, and I know that 5 is less than 28. Once I get my denominators to be the same thing, I can just compare with the numerators. So I have to go through the process of LCD in order to get it to where it's simpler. And so step 5 was to compare using the new fractions, and that's what we just did in that last step. I kind of put it forth to the other one. So when we took that 1/8 and turned it into the 40ths, and we got 5/40ths, and we compared it to the 7/10ths, which was 28/40ths, we knew that 5/40ths was less than 28/40ths. So let's try another one going through the steps. You're going to be doing this on the student side. Let's say we're comparing 1/4 to 5/16. So step 1 said to look at the denominator. And I noticed that the denominator is 4 and 16. Now I'm going to write the multiples of each number. So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and I could keep going. For 16, I have 16, 32, and I really don't have to go any farther because I already see there's a 16 in this set of multiples and there's a 16 in this set of multiples. So my LCM is 16, which magically, ta-da, turns into my LCD. Now I'm going to change 1/4 into something with 16 because my LCM, because my LCD, which is my least common denominator down here in the denominator, and I'm comparing that to 5/16, which I need to turn into 16ths as well, but look, it's already 16ths, so nothing's going to change there. 4 times what is 16? 4 times 4, so 1 times 4 is 4. So now I'm comparing 4/16 to 5/16, and I know because they both have the same denominator, I can kind of ignore the denominators now and just look at the numerator. 4 is less than 5. When you first look at 1/4 and 5/16, you cannot, with great accuracy, just say, ooh, I know which one's bigger, which one's smaller. Because look how close they were. They were 1/16 difference. They were really close in size. And so sometimes when we draw our models, that's where we have issues with not drawing them proportionately, and we can't really see which one's bigger or not. So that's why LCD is always a good, solid method to use to be sure that you're okay when all the other strategies don't work.